The air hangs thick and sweet, cloying with the scent of lilies and the forced smiles of 50 women. I watch her from across the room, her laughter tinkling like cheap champagne glasses, a sound that has always set my teeth on edge. The blush pink dress, the plastic tiara, the way she holds court. It's a performance she's rehearsed her whole life. My sister, the bride-to-be. My stomach twists, a knot of something cold and hard I can't quite name in this moment, surrounded by pastel and perfume. The noise swells around me, a tidal wave of congratulations and well wishes, none of which feel real. Not to me. Not here. I take a slow, steadying breath, trying to find solid ground in a room that feels like it's tilting. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. We grew up sharing a room, a bathroom, a last name. We shared parents, holidays, childhood dreams. But we never shared a world. Hers was always brighter, easier, lined with gilded promises. Mine felt perpetually cast in shadow, the place where her discarded toys landed, where her leftovers were served. She was the sun, and I was the pale, struggling plant in her shade, stretching desperately for any sliver of light she didn't hog. This wasn't just sibling rivalry, it was a fundamental imbalance, a constant, low-grade war waged with passive aggression and perfectly timed stings. She was the queen of the subtle jab, the innocent question loaded with contempt, the concern laced with condescension. And I learned to build walls, to keep everything that mattered hidden, to become a master of appearing unaffected. It was a survival mechanism honed over decades. My desire wasn't grand. I didn't crave her spotlight or her perfect life. I just wanted peace. A quiet corner of my own, where I wasn't measured against her impossible, airbrushed standard. I wanted to be seen, truly seen, for who I was, not just as the perpetually lacking annex to her brilliance. I wanted a love that saw me, not a pale imitation or a backup plan. I wanted what felt impossible in her orbit, genuine connection, respect, a world where I wasn't constantly bracing for the next blow. And then, amidst the relentless performance of her impending nuptials, the inevitable moment arrived. The bridal shower games, the opening of presents, the os and os over lace and lingerie. She held up a ridiculously impractical silk robe, her eyes sweeping the room, landing on me with that particular glint. The air went still, just for a microsecond, the way it does before lightning strikes. The microphone was still in her hand from thanking her guests. She smiled, a wide, innocent smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, darling," she cooed, her voice amplified, sweet as arsenic. "This is so luxurious. Maybe someday you'll find a man who can buy you pretty things like this. Maybe one day you'll get your turn." The laughter rippled through the room, polite, uncomfortable, but there. It was the casual cruelty of a queen dismissing a peasant. It was the punchline of a joke only she found truly hilarious. My world narrowed to her face, radiant with false pity and the echoing silence in my own ears. The insult hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, meant to remind everyone, and most importantly me, of my supposed lack, my single status, my failure to attain the one thing she valued above all else, male validation culminating in marriage. It wasn't just an insult about being single, it was an erasure of my worth outside of that narrow definition, a public declaration that I was less than, that my life was on hold, incomplete, until some man deigned to choose me. It hit with the precision of a trained assassin. In the immediate aftermath of her public dismissal, time stretched and warped. The laughter faded, replaced by the murmur of forced conversation, the clinking of glasses. My face felt frozen in what I hoped was a look of mild amusement, a mask I'd perfected over a lifetime of enduring her. Inside, though, a storm raged. Shame burned hot in my cheeks, quickly followed by a cold, precise anger. How dare she? In front of all these people, family, friends, strangers. She had stripped me bare, highlighting what she saw as my greatest failure, using her moment of triumph to twist the knife. I wanted to lash out, to scream, to shatter the illusion of her perfect day. But decades of conditioning held me still. I smiled, a brittle fake thing. I nodded, as if her patronizing words were somehow endearing. I tried to disappear into the crowd, to shrink until I was invisible, letting the pastel chaos swallow me whole. Each forced smile directed my way felt like a fresh wave of pity. Each averted gaze felt like confirmation of her judgment. My early struggles were silent, internal. They were about control. Control over my expression, so no one saw the depth of the wound. Control over my trembling hands, so I didn't knock over a tower of cupcakes. Control over the rising tide of fury that threatened to consume me. It was a battle fought entirely behind my eyes, in the tightening of my chest, in the icy grip on my glass of lukewarm Prosecco. I made polite conversation, asked about dresses, admired rings, all while my mind replayed her words, dissecting their cruelty, fueling the fire in my gut. I endured. I always endured. It was the only way I knew how to survive her. The days that followed were a blur of forced cheerfulness and simmering resentment. The bridal shower was just the beginning. The wedding loomed, a glittering monument to her perceived superiority. Every conversation circled back to her. Her dress, her venue, her seating chart, her perfect life. And with every conversation, another subtle dig found its way to me. A comment about how busy I must be without wedding planning consuming my life. A suggestion that maybe I could catch the bouquet and finally break my streak. A casual remark about needing to find a +1 for the wedding, delivered with a wink that twisted my insides. She wasn't just happy. She was determined to make sure I knew the full extent of my supposed unhappiness, to rub my face in the narrative she'd created for me. The lonely, overshadowed sister. My internal struggle intensified. Keeping the secret became an agonizing burden. Not just the secret, but my secret life, the one she knew nothing about, the one she would have mocked and dismissed if she did. How could I reconcile the woman she saw, the quiet, seemingly dateless sister, with the woman I was becoming? The woman who had found a connection so profound it felt like breathing underwater after a lifetime of holding my breath. The rising challenges weren't just her barbs, they were the pressure of the secret, the fear of exposure, the knowledge that the longer I kept it hidden, the more explosive the eventual revelation would be. The fiancé, bless him, was a constant source of quiet strength. He saw her behavior, he saw my pain, and his frustration mirrored mine. Our stolen moments, hush phone calls late at night, felt both precious and precarious. We were living a double life, woven tighter with every passing day, every escalating insult from her. He suggested telling her, gently at first. But I knew her. Gentleness would be perceived as weakness, an invitation for more cruelty. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding, it was a power dynamic she thrived on. Telling her prematurely before the right moment would give her ammunition, time to strategize, to twist the narrative, to make me the villain. I couldn't let that happen. Not this time. The pressure built, a relentless thrumming beneath my skin. The secret was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe freely. Every interaction with her was a performance, every smile a lie. The crisis deepened, the air growing thinner, the pressure becoming unbearable. The wedding was now only weeks away. The final fitting for my bridesmaid dress, a hideous shade of chartreuse she'd gleefully chosen, felt like putting on a uniform for my own public execution. She cornered me afterwards, alone in the bridal salon, surrounded by mirrors reflecting my constrained misery. Her voice dropped, losing the syrupy sweetness she used in public. It was flat, hard, dripping with something I recognized instantly. Pure, unadulterated malice. "You know," she said, leaning close, her smile gone, replaced by a chillingly neutral expression. "I almost didn't make you a bridesmaid. You're a bit of a downer, aren't you? Always so quiet. And, honestly, it's a little embarrassing having the only single one in the wedding party. People talk," she paused, letting the words sink in, watching my face for any flicker of pain. But he insisted. Said it wouldn't be right without you. Sentimental, I guess. Don't make me regret it. Try not to look so pathetic. Just for the day. Her words hit me with the force of a physical blow. Not just the insult, but the casual cruelty, the complete lack of empathy, the cold calculation in her eyes. And then the twist, he insisted. Not her sense of familial duty, not her love, but him. It wasn't sentimentality. It was something else. Something I knew. In that moment, standing there in that awful dress, surrounded by her reflection, something shifted inside me. The constant striving to be good enough, to be the sister she wanted, the quiet acceptance of my fate in her shadow, it all evaporated. It was replaced by a hard, glittering resolve. Pathetic? A downer? An embarrassment? This was her true opinion of me. This was the reality beneath the veneer of her perfect life. And she felt so secure in her position, so certain of my powerlessness, that she could drop the mask and reveal the contempt that had always been simmering beneath the surface. She thought she had won. She thought she had reduced me to nothing. But she was wrong. Utterly, completely wrong. The deepening crisis wasn't leading to my ruin, it was leading to her reckoning. Her cruelty hadn't broken me, it had tempered me into steel. She had pushed me too far, underestimated me for the last time. In that silent salon, surrounded by the trappings of her impending, supposedly perfect union, I made my decision. I would not just survive her wedding, I would rewrite the script. I would not be the quiet, pathetic bridesmaid. I would be the catalyst. The turning point wasn't just realizing she was truly cruel, it was realizing I no longer had to play by her rules. I had a secret weapon, one she couldn't possibly imagine, one that dismantled her entire world with a single breath. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was now overshadowed by a fierce, exhilarating sense of purpose. The time for hiding was over. The time for her to face the truth had arrived. I would walk down that aisle in that ridiculous dress, not as a symbol of her triumph and my failure, but as a silent promise of the seismic shift that was about to occur. The wedding wasn't just a date on the calendar anymore, it was the detonation point. The bridal shower continued its relentless march toward its saccharine conclusion. Speeches were made, toasts were offered, each one a fresh layer of icing on her meticulously constructed cake of perfection. I sat there, a silent observer, my mind racing, replaying her words in the salon, strengthening my resolve. The knot in my stomach was still there, but now it was anticipation, not dread. My quietness, usually a source of her mockery, became my armor. I listened, I smiled politely, I blended into the background, letting her bask in her moment, knowing, with a certainty that was both terrifying and exhilarating, that this moment was fleeting. The air in the room felt thick with unspoken tensions, maybe just my own projected anxiety, but it seemed to hum with a strange energy. Every time the fiancé caught my eye across the room, a silent conversation passed between us, a shared glance, a subtle nod. We are ready. The climax arrived not with a bang, but with a microphone tap. The shower was winding down. Gifts were opened, games were played, and everyone was getting ready to leave, buzzing with the artificial energy of a successful event. My sister, still holding the microphone, stood at the front of the room, ready to deliver her final thank yous. This was it. The moment I had braced myself for, the moment we had quietly planned. She started speaking, thanking everyone for coming, gushing about how excited she was for the wedding, how lucky she was. I watched her, her face radiant, completely oblivious. And then, her gaze swept over the room one last time, landing on me. That familiar glint returned to her eyes, the one that promised a jab, a twist of the knife. She paused, the microphone amplifying the tiny silence. And finally, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, her smile wide and performative, I just want to say a special thank you to my sister. She's been a real trooper. Even though she's going through a tough time, the implication hung in the air. Tough time meaning single, meaning lacking. It's hard, I know, watching your younger sister find her happiness first. But don't worry, darling, she cooed, her eyes fixed on me, a predatory gleam in them. Maybe someday you'll find a man who can give you all this. The laughter started, a cruel ripple across the room. My breath hitched. This was worse than the last time. More pointed, more public. My hands clenched in my lap. And then, a movement from the side. The fiancé, who had been quietly chatting with some guests, stepped forward. He wasn't smiling. He walked deliberately, confidently, until he was standing beside her. The room fell silent. All eyes were on him. He took the microphone gently from her hand, his expression unreadable. My sister looked confused, then annoyed. She shot him a look that clearly said, "What are you doing? This is my moment." He ignored her. He turned, not to the crowd, but directly to me. His eyes met mine, and in them, I saw everything. The years of waiting, the hidden glances, the quiet promises, the shared burden of the secret, the love that had grown in the shadows. A profound sense of calm washed over me, replacing the storm. This was it. The truth. He spoke, his voice clear and steady, amplified by the microphone, cutting through the stunned silence. "Actually," he said, his gaze never leaving mine. "That's not entirely accurate," my sister blinked, her smile faltering. "She doesn't need to find a man someday. Because she already has 1 inch." A collective gasp swept through the room. He turned slightly, finally addressing the bewildered faces around him. "What most of you don't know," he continued, his voice gaining strength, "is that for the past 2 years, I haven't just been planning a wedding. I've been building a life. A life with her." He gestured towards me, his hand open, inviting. My sister stared at him, her mouth agape, her eyes wide with disbelief, then dawning horror. The color drained from her face. Her perfect world was shattering around her. "We fell in love quietly," he explained, his voice softening slightly as he looked at me again. "When we weren't supposed to. When we knew it would be complicated. We kept it secret because of moments like this. Because we knew not everyone would understand. But we can't keep hiding anymore." He turned back to my sister, his expression hardening. "Especially not when she's being hurt." He stepped closer to me, offering his hand. "I'm not marrying you," he said simply to my sister, his voice devoid of emotion, a cold statement of fact. He took my hand, lacing his fingers through mine. "I'm already committed. To her." The aftermath was chaos. Pure, unadulterated, glorious chaos. My sister's shriek ripped through the stunned silence, raw with rage and humiliation. She lunged at him, at me, before she was restrained by a few quick-thinking guests, her face a mask of contorted fury, the perfect bride dissolving into a screaming banshee. The air crackled with tension, disbelief, outrage. Family members gasped, whispered, pointed. Some looked horrified, some looked thrilled by the drama. My parents stood frozen, their faces a mixture of shock and betrayal. The carefully curated facade of the perfect bridal shower shattered into a million pieces on the pastel carpet. He pulled me gently forward, shielding me slightly from the immediate storm. His hand holding mine was a lifeline. We stood there, a silent, defiant unit amidst the maelstrom we had unleashed. My sister was dragged from the room, still screaming threats and accusations. The guests devolved into pandemonium, a sea of shocked faces and urgent whispers. Within minutes, the room began to empty, people fleeing the wreckage, unable to bear witness to the complete demolition of a family and a future. The cleanup was swift and brutal. The engagement was obviously over. My sister, stripped of her perfect narrative, became instantly radioactive. She retreated into a bitter silence, refusing to speak to anyone, particularly me or him. The fallout with my parents was devastating. They oscillated between blaming him, blaming me, blaming both of us for the scandal, for ruining the family's reputation, for hurting her. There were tears, shouting matches, agonizing silences. It was a price, a heavy one for the truth. But amidst the wreckage, something new was born. Freedom. The heavy cloak of the secret was lifted. The constant anxiety, the performances, the fear, it was gone. My relationship with him, no longer hidden in the shadows, could finally breathe. We were no longer defined by the secret, but by the love that had survived despite everything. Dealing with her betrayal, with the lifetime of smaller betrayals that culminated in her cruel public mockery, was a slow process. There was no apology. There would never be one. Her silence was a punishment, another attempt to control, to make me feel guilty. But it didn't work. Not anymore. Her cruelty hadn't broken me. It had pushed me to choose my own happiness, even if it meant shattering hers. The sweet satisfaction of her public humiliation, of seeing her carefully constructed world crumble because of the very person she thought she owned, was immense. It was a cold, clean victory, a vindication of every slight, every jab, every moment I had felt less than. She had tried to bury me, but she hadn't known I had already planted roots in ground she couldn't see, nourished by a love she couldn't fathom. The lessons learned were etched deep. That quiet strength is not weakness. That choosing your own path, even a difficult one, is always worth it. That the most dangerous betrayals often come wrapped in smiles. That sometimes the only way to win is to refuse to play the game by their rules, to flip the board entirely. The cost was high, a broken family dynamic, a sister lost to bitterness. The victory was bittersweet. I had won spectacularly, but the battlefield was my own history. We left that ruined room together, hand in hand, stepping out of the artificial light and into the real world. The air outside smelled clean, fresh, free of lilies and lies. My heart ached for the loss, the irreparable damage to what little family harmony we had left. But it also soared with a quiet triumph. I wasn't pathetic. I wasn't waiting for my turn. I had built my own life, forged my own path, found a love that saw me, cherished me, and stood by me when it mattered most. She had tried to diminish me, to define me by my perceived lack, but in the end, her own cruelty had been the architect of her downfall. And I, the quiet sister, had finally stepped out of the shade, into the light, with the man she thought was hers, proving, irrevocably, that my turn had already arrived. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. And thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.